Hello, YouTube. And it's still playing music. I have no idea why. Oh, there we go. Hello, YouTube. Welcome to the first live stream with Adam from Powerbelt3D. He is the creator of, well, the Powerbelt Zero, and now soon to be the Tinybelt, which is going to have some pretty amazing features compared to some of the other printers on the market. So we got lots of stuff to, ask him today, and he's a little nervous, so be a little nice to him if you wouldn't mind. I know Brian likes to play his jokes, so I'm going to go ahead and bring in Adam and let him talk about his company to start. Here is Adam.
Are we live?
We are live. We're doing this.
Oh my gosh, this is so exciting.
Right? It's awesome. We got 4 people watching. I thought
Nice.
We had 8. I don't know what happened. Everyone just vanished.
They dish at the last minute. I'm sure they'll be.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Oh yeah. Right. So anyway, welcome to your first ever live stream.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a little different compared to recording videos because if we screw up, it's on us.
Yeah. Normally I stick to Zoom, but I'm really looking
Yes.
forward to the interaction with
Yes.
the audience and being able to answer questions on the fly and all that. So.
Right. Chris Lane says hey, and we got Jake
Hi,
from
Chris.
State Farm. He's in the Voron community. He's pretty cool. Maker Viking. I'm sure you've heard of him.
I have. These are all names that I recognize from Twitter.
Good.
Super cool.
Yes. Yep. It's and Mr. Viking with his custom design printers, so he's going nuts. There. Oh, your hero right here.
Hi, Bill. Yeah, I was just saying before we went live, I'm a big fan of your work. I was actually at Murph in 2017. I think that was the right year when you had that modified MakerBot with the conveyor belts. Super cool, super inspiring. So.
Yeah. So obviously we're trying to get a few more people in, so that's why I'm letting chat kind of build it up. Oh, people talking in chat, that happens. We got 11 people, so we might as well start off, with who you are, your company's history, etc. Where this just started from, because it seems like you've been printing for quite a few years now.
Sure. So my 3D printing journey started just a little over 8 years ago. I was a chemical engineering student at the time, and I had a temporary job in San Francisco. And this is more of an origin story than just like a blanket introduction. So we'll get back to that later. From a high level, I'm a mechanical engineer. I've been 3D printing for over 8 years now. I've been working with printers from under $200 to over $200,000, some of the higher end industrial stuff. Really, I love the technology. I want to try to put something good into the world. In 2018, I started prototyping. Hey, Grant, thanks for tuning in. In 2018, I started prototyping my very first conveyor belt 3D printer, and at the time, it was just for fun because I wanted one, and I saw the things like the black belt or even the white knight. Even though it's a self build, it's still an expensive printer, and I was like, there has to be a way that I can get the cost down, because I was so irritated with having to babysit my printers and constantly pry parts off the build plate. So I started building it. I went in some Facebook groups and sold some kits to people, just person to person. I bought all the aluminum profiles from Grainger, and I cut them by hand with a hacksaw on the steps behind my apartment at the time. And kind of, I didn't have a ton of money, right? I was working a full-time job. It was my first job out of school, so I kept trying to build gradually from there. In 2019, I went to EARTH with my prototype printer, and I did a pre-order solely through the Powerbelt website. Sold about 20 printers from there. Really wanted to hit the ground running at the beginning of 2020. Placing our first orders with international suppliers, aluminum profiles, sheet metals, electronics, the whole deal. And 2020 was not the best year to launching your first product and trying to deliver on promises to pre-order people. So it was challenging, right? Like I made mistakes. Suppliers were late. Parts didn't come in perfectly for the very first batch of printers. And then I made mistakes. Like I just forgot to put some parts in boxes because I was doing this at 9 o'clock at night after my real job. So kind of as we progressed and grew into 2021, we sold more printers. I figured out the Formula 32 combination of materials for our conveyor belts, which I think makes us really unique and different compared to some of the other offerings. But that also helped business side of things because people were able to buy conveyor belts for their own machines. And then we sold out of the zeros. And I had been working on another design a little bit for a while. I realized, I guess fairly early with the Zero, that I had strayed away from my original goal of making the Ender 3 of conveyor belt 3D printers.
Right.
So a lot of what I've seen on the internet so far these days are like, I'm so sick of Ender 3s. They're all the same. But, and while I share that frustration for sure, how cool would it be if instead of the Ender 3 being so popular that it's annoying, it was a fully automated printer? Like if it got that widespread, and like what that would enable people to do is just really inspiring for me to think about. So that was a long answer. But I think it covers the whole journey from kind of the first prototype to where we are today.
Yeah. And then of course, now you're doing your first, Kickstarter. You're bringing out a printer for the masses. That's, the Zero was $400, but I'm sure there were some downsides to that.
Yeah. So the Zero first pre-ordered for $400. But as I started learning more about how much parts actually cost and how much shipping from China costs and all of those factors, I couldn't possibly keep selling for $400.
Right.
So the price moved up to $744, and then Creality kind of matched that price point. But they have a much better reputation compared to and resources, right? They've been making printers for years. They've got tons of employees versus even today, I'm still shipping out of my house. I'm hoping to get into a new office in just a few days, actually. So that's an exciting development.
That's awesome.
Where we'll have more space, we'll have our own storefront, all that sort of thing.
That's going to be awesome. So what got you originally into 3D printing? What hit that 3D printing nerve?
Yeah, so I started going down that path with the first question, but I'm glad I backed up. Otherwise, I would have just kept talking. So I used to think 3D printing was overrated. I didn't get it. I was like, you're just making stuff out of plastic. Like, I can make stuff out of plastic. I used to take a Dremel and plexiglass and cut different shapes out of them to make stuff. Because I've been making stuff in the basement or the garage since I was 12 years old, right? It's always been part of my personality. Exactly. So I didn't get it. I thought it was dumb. And that all changed when I went out to San Francisco for a very short-term job for Instructables/Autodesk. So I was one of the first 5 people in a pilot program at the time for what they called artist in residence. I think they've shifted more towards a manufacturing incubator type thing instead of this. But at the time, I walked into their multi-million-dollar facility on Pier 9 in San Francisco, and they had laser cutters, and they had $500,000 objet printers, and they had 11-axis CNCs, and I didn't even know CNCs could have 11 axes. But I grew up in Ohio, and at that time, there weren't 3D printers in every school, right? 3D printers still cost $2,000, $5,000 on the very low end. So I had never used a 3D printer before. I had never seen one in person. I had just seen it online. And that's really when the switch flipped for me, because I was using Tinkercad at the time, and like within an hour, like I could draw something and then hold it.
Nice.
And that just totally changed how I thought about making things and making projects. So from that point on, it was like a 6-week job, that sort of thing, because it was a pilot program. I went back to Ohio. There were no 3D printers.
Right.
I switched from chemical engineering to mechanical engineering. I'm assuming we have some engineers watching or listening to this. Yeah, organic chemistry just really, really kicked me, put me in my place. So I switched over to mechanical. It was a better fit anyway. And then I wanted to try to change things in the area and like bring what I had learned in San Francisco back home. So I was working a graphic design job over the summer. And I, in my downtime, wrote up like a 10-page proposal. And I brought it to my academic advisor, and I was like, I want to start a makerspace like here at the university with students. Turns out they'd already found some grant funding, so we did that. I wrote all of the procedures for the makerspace. I brought in 3D printers and laser cutters and got more experience that way. Then I built a printer from a kit, one of those acrylic i3 frame type of things.
I know a few makers that still have those.
Yes, I have salvaged parts and like built and rebuilt, so I kind of wish I had the original at this point, because it would be fun like to look back on. But I don't.
Right.
So yeah, then I graduated. I moved to Syracuse, New York. I really, really wanted to get into the 3D printing industry.
Right.
And Ohio, still being Ohio,
Yes.
didn't have a ton of opportunities, at least at the time that I was graduating. I know things have developed a lot since then. So I worked for a Stratasys SolidWorks distributor. So that's where I got even more experience with the high-end equipment, what that user experience is like, what it does compared to the stuff I had at home. But ultimately, I've wanted to run my own business since I was like 12. Like, it was always something that I knew. My dad ran his own business the whole time I was growing up, and it was always something that I wanted. So that's kind of what, as I progressed through 3D printing and got different experiences in different different areas.
Right. So what's your favorite thing about the 3D print world, besides the rapid prototyping? Because that's most of ours, being able to see something just appear.
Yeah.
But, you know, we got Gector.
All right.
No idea who Gector is, but welcome to my, my stream.
Welcome one and all. I love being able to see an idea really take shape. Probably my favorite thing about it is that it's now accessible and normal.
Yes.
Like, I think back to when I was, in junior high, and I was making stuff in the basement or the garage, and I was taking apart old remote controls. How hard it was to make stuff, like bring my ideas to life.
Right.
And so I love that nowadays kids are able to just have 3D printers in their classroom, or they're cheap enough where they can be Christmas presents for a lot of families. I know my little cousin just got one last year. And I really like that I guess maker culture is more of a thing than it was when I was growing up, because I very much didn't know if other people had like my interests or where to connect with other people of my interests. And so I think that's all really cool. And I also look forward to when those kids grow up and can take all of that knowledge and help educate kind of like the older, more established engineers, and see how that impacts the products that we use on a daily basis.
Right. What's the thing that frustrates you the most about this industry?
I think for new people, it is so confusing.
Mhm.
And that's actually why I started the 3D Print Authority podcast, to try to like just demystify everything that's going on by interviewing the real people behind a lot of 3D printing companies or ideas. Um, like if you're just starting out, it's nearly impossible to like figure your way into buying your first machine quickly, right?
Mhm.
Like people are going through Reddit threads and Facebook groups, and it's like a running awful joke of like um, what's the best printer under $500? Like the question gets asked
Mhm.
100 times a day in different Facebook groups. Um, but then who are you listening to? Are you listening to like an engineer? Are you listening to just a hobbyist? Are you listening to someone on Reddit or YouTube? Ultimately, it's just like subjective opinion. Um, and I feel like that is a barrier that people struggle with when and might not even get into it as a hobby or as a business, because they just don't know where to look. And I find it really frustrating, especially when I was working at the Stratasys distributor. Um, I would meet with tons of different companies, tons of different industries, and their knowledge of 3D printing was sometimes like they would hire an intern and they'd be like, "Hi, intern, please figure out what printer we should buy." And they would make a spreadsheet, and it would be
Oh,
everything from
geez.
an Ender 3 up
To
to
the
a big rep
big reps,
XYZ,
yeah.
whatever it is, like $200 to $600,000,
Oh,
and they'd be
geez.
like, "All right, which one do we need?" And they had no clue, like where to start even.
Right.
Um, and so it told me that um, a 3D printing is confusing for the uninitiated, and two, I really want to see a world where it's easier for both individuals and for businesses to be able to, you know, make some of those decisions and be confident making those decisions.
Right. So you've been printing for as long as you have. What is, over the years, the coolest thing you have ever printed outside of designing something for printers?
Yeah, that's a tough question. So I used to build cool things. One of the things I did, you can now I get the most. So one of the things that I was super super proud of in junior high was I irresponsibly built a series of wrist mounted flamethrowers. So like you could press a button and pull your hand back and like shoot
Oh, geez.
flames like Iron Man. My
Sounds
mom
painful.
hated it. Hated
Oh,
it.
yeah.
But she also didn't stop me. I was too stubborn. Um, so I wish I had an example like that, but I don't. Some of the coolest things that I like now are like my super practical household prints
Mhm.
where I can like solve a problem. And
Yes.
they're usually stupid small things like, oh, I printed a sponge holder for like my wife struggled to hang a shoe rack in the closet, so I like printed some little clips for it to like
Right.
make what we had work. Um, or I'll 3D print like little toys for our cat to bat around. Um, little stuff like that, I think is really fun. So,
Nice. What's the thing? So, we all have that thing that we want to print that we just have never gotten to. I've got something for my wife I promised her 5 years ago. The problem is I have to design it and I haven't grasped CAD. What's something that you haven't printed, whether it be with a belt printer or whatever, something with SLS, no restrictions. What would you print if you could?
no restrictions. Oh, this is such a cool question. Um, I want to print a watch.
A watch.
That sounds like such a boring
Hmm.
question. So let me give some
No, I
context
mean,
for it.
yeah.
I was in high school and I got to work at a watch kiosk in the mall. Still to this day, one of my favorite jobs that I've ever had because my manager was super nice, and it was a combination of watch sales and watch repairs. So I would do battery changes. I would like swap out the stems if they broke, change out the glass on the front of watches. And before I worked there, I thought watches were super dumb. I was like, I have the time on my phone. Why would I ever need a watch?
Yes.
But from that experience, I learned like to love watches, and like they come in so many different styles. They come with different movements. There's just such a different range of quality from different brands. And yeah, I've always kind of wanted to print one, but then I kind of wanted it to be like stainless steel. You have to take into account like different types of materials because they'll be in contact with your skin constantly. So like that's kind of something to consider. I'm seeing people comment in the comments that you also love watches, which is cool. I didn't know that. So that's something that I've always wanted to print, and from a weird combination of like I would want to design it myself, obviously.
Right.
And then I would want to source like all the parts myself and like put them together. And I've just never gotten around to it.
Right.
But that's the answer I'm gonna go with.
Nice. And of course, we'll get there. I mean, you can already get stainless steel. You have to have it decentered. And it's a little complex. You know, it's not, most of us cannot do it. You know, I'm sure some of the bigger names can. But I'm sure some of the people that, you know, are tuning in want to know more about the Tinybelt printer, you know, about the thing that, you know, makes it all different. Let me pull up a picture here of the shadow, of course, because, you know, we don't like to give too much away, but
there's something I think like to the mystery of it that makes it appealing to more people.
Right.
So the Tinybelt takes everything that I've learned from 2018 when I built that very first printer to today, and kind of refocuses on my goal of making the Ender 3 of Belt 3D printers. So it's designed almost entirely around standard, off-the-shelf 3D printer components, the type of stuff that you would find on an Ender 3 or a CR10. And that means that they're affordable. They can be found nearly anywhere for replacement parts. And both of those things kind of make it more scalable. So the biggest challenge I had with the Zero was I had an initial vision, and then I was like, oh, well, it's got to be Core XY, and it's got to have an all-metal hot end, but I also want to design around standard parts only. And so I was juggling all these things, and the result was lots of custom components. Another thing was I was like, oh, I have to have a silicone heat bed, right? I've used the PCB PCB heaters. I've used the silicone ones. The silicone ones heat up way faster. That's what I want. And it snowballed out of control, where all of a sudden the super affordable, accessible Ender 3-esque printer that I was imagining was too expensive, right? It was too expensive. It used a bunch of steel sheet metal components that I thought at the time were going to be perfect, but in reality, they're just super heavy, right? And I was like, oh, well, heavy doesn't really matter. That was my thought at the time. But in reality, the weight of the printer matters tremendously. Because it's not just the raw cost of the material. That's pretty cheap, but then it's shipping from China, and then it's shipping from me to whoever is receiving it. So it's like you get hit with a weight tax almost at every leg of the journey. And that was just something I didn't even imagine when I was just starting out. So the Tinybelt is intended to really be that Ender 3 that I can buy 50 units, or I can buy 100,000 units, because all the parts are already on the shelf at the 3D printer suppliers in China. They just have to take them off the shelf and hand them to me. The custom parts, we still have a bunch of them, but I'm printing as much as we possibly can. and we're putting sheet metal parts only where I think they're needed. So there's going to be 2 sheet metal parts. There's going to be one for the X gantry, and there's going to be one for the hot end assembly, both of the rolling components. So they'll be super stiff, very flat. And those are 2 of the things that that were challenging when making the first prototype.
Right. So what makes the Tinybelt different from the Zero that I don't know if anyone in the chat has? But I didn't unfortunately get one. I was waiting for things to progress. But what makes it different, better, whatnot?
Sure. So it has some things are better, some things that I don't quite like as much as a pure printing nerd. But it is different. Compared to the Zero, it'll take up less space on your desk, but it'll actually have a larger build volume. Some of the components that made up the Core XY assembly on the Zero ended up taking up more space than maybe they needed to. So it doesn't really optimize for desk space. Another big difference is the extruder. So it's going to have a dual drive extruder compared to the single gear on the Zero, but it's going to be a Bowden tube setup instead of direct drive. I like direct drive systems, but kind of my inspirations behind some of these design decisions is Prusa on one hand. If Prusa can print 90% of their parts and still be successful, why can't I do that? Does it all have to be sheet metal? And then when it comes to direct drive, I don't have numbers behind it, but I imagine most of the printers people are really using are all Bowden setups, right?
Let's make a poll.
Let's make a poll. Let's figure out, at least for the stream, are you using the majority Bowden setups or direct drive setups? But the Ender 3, the CR30, the CR10, they're all using Bowden setups and people seem okay with it. If you go up a couple steps, Ultimaker still uses a Bowden setup, right? And they're selling, $10,000 machines to mostly businesses these days. So if they can be successful, why can't a Bowden setup be okay?
Right.
The hot end is going to be a Mark 8 style hot end where the Bowden tube goes all the way down to the nozzle. I'm not crazy about that, but upgrade parts are easy to find. You can get a heat break replacement on Amazon for like less than $10. You can get some copperhead components from Slice Engineering. Those should be able to bolt right into place if you want something a little bit more high end. So it gives people a starting point for belt printers that should be accessible, and then they can kind of make it their own from there. And I think having that starting point is so important because my first printer was a box of parts sent straight from China that I split 50-50 with my roommate at the time because, again, I was in college and didn't have a ton of money. And like just being able to get my feet wet with like an in-depth printing experience and just learn and grow from there was so useful for me that I want other people to have that same option, but for belt printers.
Nice. So, I know there's been a lot of talk in the community about on the iFactory one, the Creality CR30, the belt material. I guess there's been issues throughout production and issues holding on to materials. Just there was a video that 3D Printing Nerd had where one of his things just fell right off, and that was today's video. What makes your belt different, better, whatnot than the Creality? Seems like just like a belt.
Yeah, so someone actually sent me one of the Creality belts. So it's really cool for me to be able to like hold and feel both and like compare them, even though I haven't printed on the Creality belt yet. So they're so different. Like I was surprised how different they were. First, our belt is thinner. It's like half to a third the thickness of the Creality belts. And that's important when getting heat transfer from the heated bed through the conveyor belt, so the stuff will actually stick to it. Our belt is a real non-porous print surface. So I think that's a big difference, because I think it helps when you're trying to use adhesives, like glue stick or magic glue or any of those things on the belt itself. Maybe anyone who has a CR30 can shoot me an email or a message or something. But their belts are like lightly porous, where I get worried that like a glue stick or something would like sink in and maybe not be as effective. I don't know. Okay. But our top surface is green PET polyester tape. And that is a print surface that has been around since, I don't know, 2014. It's not super popular, which confuses me, because I've used PEI surfaces and I've used PET surfaces, and at least in my experience, they tend to perform similarly, like strangely similarly. But the PET tape is like 1/10 of the cost of PEI. Right. And I think cost is so important when you're looking at not just like a little 8x8 square of material for the print bed, but you're looking at like square feet of material for the belt itself. Like that cost multiplies super quickly. Right. And in an effort to make something that's super affordable and accessible for people, that cost is a deterrent, right? I think one of the big reasons why the White Knight hasn't been more widely adopted is that a lot of people don't know, like, the belt itself is like $500. Like, just the belt with the stainless steel shim plus like the beautiful, admittedly beautiful custom build tag surfaces. Looks great, but it's really expensive. Like when it's 2/3 the cost of a Prusa or the full cost of getting a CR10, like that's a hurdle that I think a lot of people can't overcome.
Right.
So
stepping back to Bowden direct drive, looks like 4% direct drive, 44% both, and 11% Bowden. So direct drive, it's almost a 50-50 split.
I'm going to call that a 50-50.
Yeah, that's pretty close. I've only ever used Bowden once, and I was not a fan of it personally, but just things in it, but learning how to tune. Anyway, continuing the belt conversation.
No, I think those results are super interesting, actually. For the longest time, I ran a 50-50 combination of direct and Bowden tubes. But recently, I converted my Ender 3 to direct drive, and it has made me so happy compared to the print quality I was getting before. So,
nice.
Anyway, creating a belt that is both inexpensive, I can order material in small volumes, super important for me. Like, I reached out to some belt companies, and they're like, "Oh, great, our minimum order is $10,000." And I'm like, "Well, it's not going to work." So inexpensive. I can order materials in small volumes. A real print surface that works with a lot of different materials is all really important to me. So our Formula 32 belts, I've tested with carbon fiber filled materials, wood filled materials, PLA, PETG. Works shockingly well with ABS, like no glue stick whatsoever, just a hot bed. It works so well it surprised me. I thought for sure like it would barely stick, or it would just warp like crazy, but it works. I've tried nylon. Nylon required a lot of glue sticks. Probably like a magic. Excuse me, I'm gonna have to drink some water.
No, go ahead. No, you're good. Lots of comments from Chris Lane and Bill Steele on the belts. Sounds like they've got some interesting stuff. And Masumi makes conveyor belts, which Chris Lane's testing. So that's a interesting option, but that's more readily available. Now,
Sure.
one of the big questions being PET tape. When I started, it was a lot of PEI and glass.
Yeah.
And I ruined a lot of PEI. I still ruin PEI. How resilient is this stuff going to be to tearing? You know, you say you get your nozzle too close, and are we going to tear the material on that bed and be down for a week waiting on a new belt? What's the everyone does it. It's
Everyone does it.
universal.
I've done it myself.
Exactly.
Actually, I got the nozzle too close and made a rough spot in the belt on the Zero just last week. So it happens. It's again surprisingly resilient, and I think it's resilient because you can roll the parts off the conveyor belt. So when at least I use PET tape and glass on my printer behind me. A lot of the damage comes with, I guess, the ripping of the part off the conveyor or off the plate when I'm done printing and trying to scrape underneath it. But because you're rolling, you're actually just applying force to the part in such a small amount at a time that I haven't had many issues. Also, I think because the material under the PET tape is soft, it's not hard glass, you can get a little bit more forgiveness with the nozzle being close to it. I don't know for sure, but that's just my theory. So I think so far of our Formula 32 belt customers, I haven't had, I've had like one person be like, I tried my first print and I ripped a hole in it.
And this is why there's questions in the chat. Yeah, these Viking Chris Travis, they know what I've done. This is why there's questions. I'll be that one. So
what's good is right now I'm building some machines to help automate and also improve the quality of our Formula 32 conveyor belts. I don't have a timeline on when the new and improved version will be there, but I imagine that belts will become more the lead time on them. I won't be making them with as much manual labor as I have so far. So we'll be able to crank more out more consistently. Have replacements readily available, and the quality, specifically around the thickness of the belts, should improve. So that's something we can look forward to.
That'd be good. Just adding a link for people down below if they want to check out the Formula 32 belts. Nice. Now the big question is, some people are going to overbuild. Some people eventually will have larger belt printers. How is there a limit to the length of the belt?
The only limit is the space that I currently have, and I guess the fixtures that I currently have. Other than that, that's another thing I really like about it is it's very scalable, both up and down, based on the materials that we use in the process. So the biggest belt I've made so far, I think, was 20 inches by 60 inches.
Wow.
So almost 2 feet by almost 5 feet. Exactly.
Okay.
So that was a huge belt. I definitely ran into some challenges and some things that I learned about how the materials bond together and making sure everything is nice and super flat and consistent across the whole thing. But again, some of the robots that I'm building will help with that manufacturing process. And the robots are really just 3D printers that are very special. So I'm very excited about that. The other thing, as this relates to the Tinybelt, something that I love about this current design is that it's also very scalable. Like bigger extrusions, longer extrusions, larger build plates, longer motion belts. And that's about all you need. So, again, no promises or anything, but I'm excited to see kind of like how I can scale up the design or how other people can scale up the design.
And I guarantee people will be scaling. I'd scale it if I had some more space, but I'm in a small 12 by 10 room. So compared to a standard Cartesian or a Voron or whatever else, or a Delta printer, what drew you to design besides the price? We've already talked about that, but what drew you to design a belt printer versus just something else?
Yeah, for me, it was all about automation.
Okay.
So when, again, going back to my last year in school with that acrylic frame i3 printer, that I just remember the other day. At one point, I messed up the Z end stop and its placement, and so I would just home the printer and then pause when it started, and then I would manually adjust the lead screws to get it back down to the build plate. I think that's so fun. Anyway, I started selling parts out of my apartment. I teamed up with 3D Hubs, who allowed anyone with a 3D printer basically to get on their platform. And I was the only 3D printing hub in Northwest Ohio. So I was taking in orders. I had that printer paid for in full within 6 months of listing my services.
Nice.
And at the same time, I was running the makerspace. So students, colleagues, my peers at the time would come to me at the end of the semester and be like, "Hi, I need 10 parts." And I'd be like, "Well, we have 2 5th-gen MakerBots, and all your parts are going to take 2 weeks to make. I can't help you. Can we change the design?" All those things. But so I was managing parts for students 2 blocks away at the lab. I was managing parts for my customers in my apartment, and it just felt so real to me how the automation problem exists. And then as I started working in industry, it stood out to me that nearly every other manufacturing process is automated. Like injection molds are totally automated. They have CNC mills that, like, you put a pallet of aluminum stock on one side and you take a pallet of perfectly packed parts placed by robot arms in their crates on the other side, and then the owners turn off the lights and they go home. Like, they're not coming back to the shop at 3 a.m. because their CNC machine needs the plate changed. So that, again, just screams to me that, like, it needs to be automated if we're going to take printing to the next level. And again, I think the accessibility of it is, again, so important to me. If the barrier to entry is $10,000, then individuals who want to start printing and selling parts, a lot less of them are going to do that. And if you're a business looking at a startup trying to make the next Nest thermostat or whatever, looking at a $10,000 printer or a $10,000 injection mold, the injection mold is tried and true. It's established. You don't want to gamble the same money on something that hasn't really been vetted out for decades. So those were all my long-winded motivations behind the belt printer. I will say that I built it because of the automation, but then as I started using it more and more, I totally fell in love with the infinite 3D printing aspect and being able to print stuff that's longer than the machine. Just, like, it's so satisfying to watch. It, like, breaks my brain a little bit in how it works. And as I've surveyed people and talked to more and more people who are interested in it, I'm always surprised by how many people are like, I want both. Like, I legitimately want both key value points from this style of machine. Like, I can imagine myself wanting to print a cosplay sword one day, but also most days be printing my battery holder for an eccentric tool that I sell on Etsy.
And that speaking of that, obviously, last year everything blew up. There were a bunch of people printing face masks, face bands. I was part of a huge effort here in Colorado where we had about 100,000 face shields.
That is so many.
With 300 makers. And the thing that drove everybody nuts was having to get up at 3 a.m. to start another print. or maintaining that. And the belt printers came just a little too late to the show to make a difference. But an army of belt printers, it would have been, we probably could have done another 20,000-30,000 had we tried.
Exactly. And I was a part of kind of like a local New York effort at the time where we were also printing face shields, and I was running like all my printers around the clock.
Yep.
I was also scraping off plates all the time, and so like I felt that
damaging
pain.
plates. Yep.
I felt also damaging plates.
Yep.
I felt that pain all over again, and I'm like, this is why
Yep.
we need it to be automated.
Yep.
And to your point, that movement was all over the world, like all over the world. And so
Prusa started it with their design.
Yeah, Prusa started with their design, and then oh my gosh, I can't believe I don't remember.
It's okay.
Buckman, 3D, something like that. He created his own design and kind of like kicked it off in the United States at like a whole nother level. So cool. And I think it's just like a tiny case study of what this could do for manufacturing. Like I can imagine real distributed manufacturing. Like, and admittedly, there's more to manufacturing than just making plastic parts, but plastic parts are a part of so many other consumer products, where it can be one very automated part, and then we can work on the hardware, the heat set inserts, all of that. We can do that in a secondary stage. But I imagine that someday a machine shop or a UPS store could plug in an automated printer, and people could order their parts and just like walk into their local UPS store. I'm thinking of like those brands that already have worldwide presence, and get their parts on demand in lots of different quantities, and those stores can like plug in multiple different cells and increase capacity. I think it's a really cool possibility for the
right. Going back directly to the Tinybelt. So big questions, and I'm sure people are wondering why Kickstarter? Why choose a platform like that instead of just putting it on your site and setting it for pre-order? And then the big question is with Kickstarter, say you don't hit the numbers, is that going to stop you from continuing? Say you set a whatever number goal. Explain your thought process if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. I have thought about answers to like 2/3 of that. So the first part being why Kickstarter. And there's a few different reasons. The first one is I did a survey. This whole figuring out which side my hands can be visible on is really
it's tough. Yeah, it's tough because it's reversed.
It's my right hand. I'm gonna remember that hopefully. There's a couple reasons. The first one is that I ran a survey. Right, I just put a survey out there towards the end of 2020. Was really trying to plan for this year and what Powerbelt would become, because honestly at the time it wasn't going great. I put out a survey. One of the questions was, I hate Kickstarter. Was how do you feel about Kickstarter? And the options were, I hate Kickstarter, not ever. I'm okay with Kickstarter from companies that like I'm familiar with. And then there was also one for people to enter in their own comments, which was really fun to read through. And 70% were like, if it's a company I'm familiar with, I'm cool with it. And so I was like, okay, clearly there's something more here where the people who hate Kickstarter are just the loudest people in the room, right? Because it feels as a community, people just hate Kickstarter. But the data says otherwise. And then my second reason is that it works. Right? If you look at Big Tree Tech and Creality alone, Big Tree Tech did a Kickstarter last year. Creality did 2 Kickstarters last year, raising millions of dollars. It just works. And I tried the pre-order thing, right? I wanted to be the person who was like, I see you. I hear you. Kickstarter. I've been burned on Kickstarters. I'm not gonna do a Kickstarter. I'll just do pre-orders.
Yep.
And I got crickets. Right. I sold 20 machines, not 10,000 machines. I admittedly, I didn't do a great job of marketing it. I've learned a lot more about that as time has grown on. So it works.
Yep.
The media likes it. The media likes sharing it and writing about it, so that you don't have to pay $1,000 for every article that gets written about you. That is a real thing that I've learned as a part of running a business, which feels strange, but it's the truth. It works, and if it works, and if it helps us get to the next stage, then I think it's worth it. With the God, what was the second part of your question? What happens if we don't hit our goal?
Yeah, what happens if Kickstarter does just you hit 50%, you hit 70%? You know what? You know.
I haven't figured that out yet. I think that if we don't hit our goal, that the Tinybelt legitimately won't exist.
Okay.
I'm planning to set it at a real goal of what we really need to be able to place orders in high enough quantities to get to the price point that I want to hit.
Right.
So if we don't hit the goal, it's just not going to exist. Right.
Unless you get an investor or something like that, you know.
Even there, Kickstarter proves that it's something that people want.
Right.
Right. That's half of the appeal for companies, at least from my understanding. If we don't hit the goal, that proves that people don't want it at a scale where it makes sense to actually make it.
Right.
Like, it can't be profitable over any amount of time making 50 printers at a time. It just can't. Or we'd have to charge $1,000 a piece. And that's never been the goal for Powerbelt or for the Tinybelt. So if the Kickstarter doesn't work, I'm going to continue working on projects and products, all that center around making 3D printing more automated and and specifically FDM more automated and more prone to affordable automated machines that can produce parts for people. But yeah, that's I think that's where I'm at today.
Nice. So obviously I've got a few more questions and we got to get some Q&A from them. So we see if we can power through these. I assume, like most 3D printing, this printer is going to be an open source printer. Once it's been fully released, you know, you do your Kickstarter, you're successful, you know, then people can be like, all right, let's modify. You know, if someone wants a different HUD, a different board, different this, different that, or linear rails, you know, that should be, I assume, open to them.
Yeah, absolutely. The shorts. No, Bill, I haven't shipped them yet.
He'll ship them. Ooh, did we lose you?
But thank you for a few different belts at the end of last week. So I'm planning to make them tomorrow. I'll have them shipped Tuesday, barring something horrible goes wrong. So
a little bit of internet lag. Can you hear me, Adam? The Ohio internet is doing him well. We cannot hear you, Adam. You might need to disconnect and come back in. There you are. Can you hear us?
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Something happened.
I was worried about it.
Yeah, no, we're trying to keep an eye on it.
Okay. As I was saying, if we hit our...
right as you're talking. Let's see. See if there's anything I can do. Nope. Give it just a second. Sorry, guys. All right. It's definitely lagging.
We've been doing so well for almost an hour now.
I know. It
So
knows.
yes, it knows. For the last time, hopefully.
Right.
The printer will be open source. People will be able to modify it. I want people to be able to hack and modify it, make it their own. It's going to be just the Kickstarter goal. It's not going to be a stretch goal. I have learned so much from open source printers and people sharing things freely online. If Bill hadn't shared the code to do angled slicing, who knows where we or so many other belt printing companies would be right now. So it just seems like the right thing to do to make it open source.
Right.
I know at some point that there will be clones, and that really bothered me at first. But ultimately, I kind of just did a lot of soul searching. It was like, how cool would it be if we were able to make something good enough that other companies wanted to copy it, right? And surely that'll drive the cost down for a bunch of other people, and more people will have belt printers, and that's all a good thing. So.
Yes. Few last questions. You already talked about metal and 3D printed parts, so we don't have to go over that one. I'm assuming it'll be compatible with a Raspberry Pi for most. I'm sure most people like to have everything remotely accessible.
Sure. I run my Zero off of a Raspberry Pi. There are a bunch of different queuing plugins that you can get that are free. It's a great setup.
Now, a couple questions about the printer itself. Is there any concern about the cantilevered arm being a single arm with no support at the top, having its, say you're printing really fast, is that end going to sway?
Yes. I was super worried about it at first, and I managed to talk myself out of it. And how that happened was two things. I got it to work and not wobble and print nicely with a 3D printed arm mount.
Okay, that's good.
It was a really beefy part. It was PETG. It's almost completely solid. Waste of plastic. But then my experience with the Zero really showed me how stiff you can make something when you're working with steel sheet metal parts.
Yes.
So this is our beta steel sheet metal mount, and it is just, it's so, I just moved my microphone. I hope I didn't blow out anyone's eardrums. It's so stiff. And on the back here, we have two different eccentric nuts, so like you can really tighten it down. I don't think it's going to be a problem at all. Our aluminum profiles should be here by the middle of the week, which is really exciting. So I'll be able to do a little bit more testing, qualitatively about like how much it might wobble or deflect. So
last two questions, and we can get to the community Q&A. Now, everyone's seen the CR30s mounted on the wall.
Yeah.
Is this going to be wall mountable? Because there is a spot right there for this printer.
Yeah, when I first saw Repcord's wall mounting solution, I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. It's going to save so much space. And then I really like how he does bins underneath it to divide separate parts based on where they're placed on the belt. Super cool stuff. It will be wall mountable. The back of the frame is a big 20 by 60 millimeter V-slot extrusion. But the wheels only move along the top rail,
top set,
if you will. So I thought about it kind of as I was designing it. You could totally make a mount that actually bolts to the bottom part of the rail and mounts to the wall.
3D printable, hopefully.
Yes,
with
3D printable. It should be 3D printable and wall mountable.
Nice.
The wall mounts should be 3D printable and pretty straightforward to draw up if anybody wants to.
I'm sure there'll be people doing it within. I know one guy, that Zach. He'll probably do that right away.
Yeah.
And of course, last question. You're using Ender 3 components. We all know that the Ender 3 has limitations in the materials it can print without modification. All metal hot end, yada yada. Which will the all metal hot end be able to be put in, as well as what won't we be able to print? Are we limited to non-carbon fiber, to non-over 250C? Is that going to be or are we going to be able to modify it to make it use that?
Yeah. Fully modifiable, and because it's built around standard 3D printer parts that thousands of other printers are using, upgrade parts will be cheap and easily accessible. Like if you want to change out the throat, I think I mentioned, like I already found some on Amazon that are 2 for $12. Boom, all metal hot end, easy modification. If you want to do carbon fiber, it's going to use a standard Mark 8 nozzle. So you can, again, go on Amazon, buy a hardened steel nozzle. I've put a hardened steel nozzle in my Zero because, again, it was just a Mark 8 nozzle. Tons of options out there for where to buy them. You can buy them all over the world. As far as materials that you can't print, anything's possible with enough modifications. But out of the box, you should be totally fine with PLA, PETG, ABS, as long as you keep the temperatures reasonable. I know tons of people print PETG on stock Ender 3s.
Yep.
One thing that I did when I was designing the heatsink fan mount was I made sure to put a fair amount of plastic in between the fan itself and the heat block, and I left the top of it completely open. Okay. So what I'm hoping that does for people, and I've been printing PETG on the Tinybelt prototype almost exclusively, and it works really well.
I've got a 10 kilogram roll that's going to go through that machine.
Nice. I left the top open. That way the air wants to escape through the top and not interfere with the plastic as it's being laid down.
Nice. Well, that gets rid of the interview portion. Obviously, we want the community to ask questions and get answers to what they're wondering, because I can't ask them all. But, let's start with Steve L. He's got a good question. Okay. Are you going to release the SDL files? He wants to print the parts. Is Steve a beta tester?
Honestly, I don't know off the top of my head.
I know I had asked in the Discord if we can print our own parts. I know you did say yes, so I assume he is based on his message there.
Okay. For sure.
Yes, he is a thing, and that there's tons of colors. I have blues. I have tons of filaments. So being able to print our own parts for the heck of it, why not?
Yeah, absolutely. People who are beta testers in the Discord, I want to get one printer assembled and just verify that all of the files that I have now work in person compared to just in the CAD model. Right. But after I do that, I'm happy to share the STLs with the group. I would be super interested to see different colors of stuff. I've seen people spruce some modifications in different colors, and I think it's awesome. So
big question there is, in the Voron community, there's a restriction. You have to print this with this with this with this to get the right set type of parts.
Gotcha.
Are you going to put suggestions out there with your printed parts so that we're not printing parts that are too big, too small, that are going to cause problems going forward?
Yeah. I'm happy to do that. Okay. Honestly, cool. Off the top of my head, I've been printing with 6 shells, 30% infill, 4 top and bottom layers. Pretty much everything is at 300 microns because it's faster.
Right.
But there are some less load bearing parts like the LCD screen or that you can just kind of do whatever you want with.
Right. Question from Chris Lane. What's your method for print surface belt tightening? Do you have a specific mechanism? Because as the belt heats up and cools down,
it might expand a bit. Yes. So on the Zero and also on the Tinybelt, one of the rollers is totally fixed in place. And it lines up to the frame. That way you know that it's square along the frame. The other roller is mounted with T-slot nuts in the V-slot extrusion of the frame, and then you pull that, and tighten the bolts to move them in place. It's not a 100% perfect system, but what you can do is you can actually 3D print little uh, inverse clamps
Mhm.
where instead of clamping down, you're expanding. And then
Okay.
you can tighten the bolts and you can put one of those on each side and kind of use that. The one area I find it hard to tighten the belt is it's like I'm holding the mount for the roller in one hand and holding it under tension and then tightening it with a hex key in the other hand. So it's a little bit messy. Um, but it works. And then
Yeah.
typically once I get it set and tight on the belt, it just stays for months and months on end.
Good.
So
Because I know adjustments with, Cartesian and Delta printers are quite frustrating.
yes, if you have to adjust the bed every day or something
Yes, exactly. So here's a question from, well, this is my wife asking a question. So,
like that. Oh my gosh. I'm so happy she's watching.
right? Me too.
But is the inaccessibility about knowing, understanding which printer to get?
Yeah.
How do you hope
Like,
the Powerbelt will be
say
more
you go to Micro
accessible?
Center and there's 5 printers, what do you get? There's no one walking. Most of the people in Micro Center aren't going to want to talk 3D printers.
Yeah.
So,
how I view 3D printing as a whole, and what I guess I wish more companies would do is, and something that I haven't been the best about in the past, is just being very upfront about who the printer is for and who the printer is not for.
Okay.
When I made the Zero, in my head, it was perfectly obvious that somebody who has never 3D printed before should not buy this printer. I was wrong. People that had never printed before bought the printer, super confused. They had never looked at firmware before. They had never plugged in a hot end, like actually to the board. And that was never my intention, right? The Zeros were shipped as very nicely organized, but still a box of parts. And then I'm happy to support over email, but there's only so much support I can give.
And that's where the Discord will come in as it grows.
For sure.
Yeah.
So that's what I think I want for Powerbelt as a future, is to be very clear that this is meant to be still kind of an advanced machine in terms of 3D printing, and that the base unit probably shouldn't be purchased if you don't have a bunch of technical expertise or you've never built a printer before, or if you want to run it 24/7, 365. Like, you're probably going to need some upgrades for that, specifically around the hot end is my area of concern. But as the project grows outside of Kickstarter, I'm hoping that we can kind of make those tiers within our store, and have like the maker version where you get a box of parts, and then you have like the standard version where it comes 90% assembled with the Creality experience of putting in a few bolts and then you start printing, and then maybe an upgraded version with an upgraded hot end, a maintenance agreement. I don't know, stuff that people might want if they're like serious about using it as a business and don't really know much about printing.
Right. Question from Bill Steele, and you may not want to answer this just because you're trying to keep some stuff, behind the scenes so far. But he's wondering what electronics on it. You already talked MK8, but control board, screen, whatnot.
I'm cool with electronics right now. I picked out an SKR Mini, so it has built-in TNC 2209 silent stepper driver, so it'll do sensorless homing, which will be really cool.
That's good.
It'll be really quiet in operation. One thing I learned is that if you're sending people a printer kit, the drivers will confuse them, and where the jumpers need to go will confuse them. And it will require a lot of hand holding. So I did away with all that. It's good motor drivers. You can't upgrade them unless you're upgrading the whole board. But no confusion there.
And then firmware, of course. Are you running, Marlin? You're going to run Clipper. What's, Clipper's the new big name in,
Yeah, I'm thinking Marlin. It's what I know, especially for the beta units. It's what I know. It works well. It's well established within so many different machines where I feel like if people want to dig in and tinker with it, it'll be most normal for them. So that's where my head's at
Okay.
today. I've heard good things about Clipper. I've heard good things about rep firmware.
But they're out of your current,
my current skill set for sure.
Right. Another question from Bill. Are you pulling the belt from the front roller, or are you pushing from the back? Where's the motors, or is it both? You have them timed together.
Ooh, that would be cool. But
but the problem is if one gets off step, rip that belt in half.
yeah. Let me share.
Yeah. Share screen. Make sure you select just your specific window, and
okay,
we'll show some cool stuff.
All right, cool. You can see this. This is my active working CAD model. So this is our Z motor. We're pulling it from the front. One thing that I always struggled with on the Zero was when I wanted to move the belt by hand. So I actually added this little hand crank to the front. We'll see how effective that actually is. But that was the idea. The touchscreen is both the LCD screen is both a touchscreen and it has a knob. Because I know there are preferences both ways. And sometimes when you're dealing with very affordable touchscreens, they're not super responsive. So you have both going on there. It does look a little bit small, but it was the right price point. So
nice. Yeah, and again, something people can upgrade. Bigger screens, whatnot. They're out there.
They are absolutely, and it's all very plug and play. So
right. And then I know there's on the Creality there's the extension to make it go as long as you want with rollers.
Ooh, yes.
Is that I assume that's going to be something. Here's a thing from.
And the fingerprints driving nuts. Yes. So I have mixed feelings on the whole roller assembly. Based on my experience, I think it's overkill. And we're also using really thin rollers, so I'm not sure it'd be effective across the whole thing. So this is purely conceptual at this point. But it's a shelf. So I imagine this piece could be CNC'd or laser cut pretty easily internally. This could be an add-on that I'll probably do after the Kickstarter. But we'll see what happens in between now and the actual launch of the Kickstarter. But I like the idea of just keeping it simple and not having a bunch of add-ons for different tiers and different things. But this is just a shelf, and then it'll have your standard bed leveling springs on the sides. And it can slide over the shelf, and I think that'll do.
Biggest worry would be friction pushing against the part. The good thing is with Kickstarter, you could put that out there goal to make a roller system. All you need are 608 bearings and some 3D printed rollers, and you're done.
Exactly.
So that's going to be awesome, and especially the way you have the frame. It's add-onable. It's not the end of the frame, and you can continue to expand.
So it just has, and I'm probably showing too much of the CAD model. I'm going to ruin the mystery. But
I think we're doing that anyway.
It just bolts onto the bottom, right?
Okay.
So you don't have to disassemble any other part of the frame. You can just bolt it on.
Add it right on.
Which I'm pretty happy about.
Very nice. So. Let's see. Will the Tiny run standalone? No computer, no Raspberry Pi. You have an SD card that's going to be usable, or you need that Raspberry Pi?
You can absolutely run it standalone. Not only will it have a full-size SD card slot, but it will be able to take files from a USB stick. Such a strange feature that we don't have in most printers yet. But when I was looking at the electronics choices, I saw that and I was like, yes, that is what I want and have wanted for so long, and I'm gonna make it happen.
Right. Gector was putting Clipper on. I know another guy, Zach, will probably put it on.
If Clipper's your thing, more power to you.
Yeah. That's why we'll have access in the beta to the firmware and be able to help modify it. And the Clipper community, it's new. It's still new, so that's why it's a little toxic right now. Clipper is great for people to install on their own. And I installed it on one of my Prusa's and it did not work. It's on the Voron and it works great. So some printers don't like it. Obviously, suggestions on the belts. Keep them. Keep both of them moving so you still have that motion. You're not stretching the belt or anything like that.
That's an interesting idea. One of the things that I've seen so far is like the front one is the driver, and then the back one is just kind of
master slave type thing.
Yeah, it's just idling. And it's worked on the Zero, but that's something that I had never thought of before. So it's definitely worth looking at.
Let's see. We didn't shun you though, did we? I hope not.
Justin, are you a part of the Clipper fan club?
No, I'm both. I like Marlin and Clipper.
Is it the best firmware that's ever been made, and no printer should exist with linear advance?
It's cool. I mean, even Marlin has linear advance. Some people are pushy. Tutorials. There we go. Keep asking questions, guys.
I'm throwing some shade, but Clipper is impressive, and I'm overall happy that people have options of different firmwares to have that are all free and open source. It's a great thing.
Right. Let's see. One big thing I will tell you: don't tin the wires on your connections. That's a big no-no in the Creality world. Do your ferrules.
I have heard that over and over again. There's crimp connectors, but they're expensive,
right?
Yes. And it's manual labor, but
one fire,
there's not enough liability insurance in the world to make me want to tin wires after everything I've seen and heard. So.
Yep. Let's see. I'm trying to pull up. Here's the Kickstarter thing. People are asking about specs and straight off your website. Let's see. Share. So build specs of the Tiny. Let you expand on that a little.
Sure. So it's going to be moving target in between 250 and maybe up to 280 millimeters on the X. Nice. 200 millimeters on the Y, which is your angled axis, and then infinite long on your Z axis. I mentioned the 32-bit SKR Mini, the touchscreen which is both touch and has a click wheel, heated bed, dual Bowden gear extruder. You'll recognize it. It looks like the all metal aluminum design that is on the Sierra 30 actually, and then the Formula 32 conveyor belt.
Asking if the y-axis angle is adjustable. If most of them are 45, some are talking 30s better, 35. I've heard that through the
So
rumors. Is that
my sweet spot has been 35 degrees, and it has become a weird hill that I'm here to die on. 35 degrees does two things. First, it helps your nozzle not dig into the belt in any way. It gives you a little better angle based on the shape of the nozzle. And two, it has a more perpendicular path for the filament to flow through the nozzle onto the belt, so you get better belt adhesion. I intentionally did not make it an adjustable angle belt as much as I wanted to. If you read through enough articles, I know Black Belt at one point was trying to patent that. And so the files will be open source, and what you do with those in your print angles is totally up to you. But from a point of risk mitigation, it's going to be a fixed angle.
Nice. Question from Steve. Can we do assembly? I know you had mentioned it in your original video for the people that got selected that we can. If, send us a box of parts and, let us have some fun.
If you are one of the box of parts type of people, I want to fully support you in building your own printer. I actually just this past week started Justin, can you close your screen share?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Paying
No, it's
attention
okay.
over here.
There we go. So just this past week, I started putting together the assembly
Assembly guide.
guide for
Nice.
the Tiny. Back in the day, I did video only, but because the CAD model for the Tiny is very clean compared to what I did in the past, I started putting together a written guide, um, piece by piece. So um, I plan to send out a survey of some kind once all the parts actually arrive at my door, and you can just click box of parts or
Yeah.
90% assembled. Because I know there's always that argument with people of like, I don't have a lot of time
Hmm.
to put it together or tinker with it versus I really love putting it together.
Yeah.
So
And there will be live streams. I'm sure we can put together one here where we're, looking down, and everyone does live streams of their assemblies.
definitely,
Something to guide through and fix things, and so something happens, have someone else other than you assemble it, so that way we know if there's an issue for future.
yeah.
Let's see,
I did say 250 millimeters wide. It
but
might go up to
that'd
280
be
depending
cool,
on how it shakes out when I
right?
actually build the first one with all the beta components.
Uh, and then I know you were talking Idea Maker as the slicer. I'm a big fan of Idea Maker. I use it more than Prusa Slicer. And then, of course, Black Belt Cura, because Black Belt's printers are, insanely priced. One of those,
Yeah.
pricing ones, but they do have different options. So,
Um.
um,
Yeah. I was super skeptical of Idea Maker
mhm.
being a raised 3D product, just because it is one of those higher priced products. Um,
Yes, and
but they
it's free.
they but the software is free, and
Yes.
they just did a great job with it.
Mhm.
Honestly, it has every feature that I could possibly want, every
Mhm.
lever that I might want to pull.
Right.
Um, Support generation, that's good from what
Mhm.
I've seen so far. It has modifier meshes, which I never played with before.
Yep.
Before actually using them in Idea Maker because Bruce's Slicer's interface just wasn't for me. Um, Bill, I have heard about Kirimoto. It's on my list of things to check out and also add to our website
Mhm.
as one of the belt slicing options.
Right.
Someone told me that Kiss Slicer also does
I've
belt
heard.
slicing now, but I can't confirm or deny.
Right.
Um, I've been happy with Idea Maker, and so I'll provide profiles and
Profiles.
how to import them and
Mhm.
all that good stuff.
Yeah, that's good. Um, right. I mean, they're not wrong. I like
You're
the box of parts. I mean, I had to build this thing from boxes and orders of parts. Where's my finger?
yes.
you know.
So the box of parts is it's a double-edged sword, man, because
Mhm.
on one hand, my experience with the Zero has taught me that sometimes people who aren't in their soul box of parts people will buy them
Mhm.
and then they put something together wrong, but they claim that the parts are defective and then they're just mad at me and like I have no way to diagnose the problems from
Mhm.
across the country. Um, if you are a true box of parts person and you've built printers before, then it's your best option.
Right. Um, let's see. And we all know Maker's making his, custom printers. We got about 10 minutes left for those in the chat. If you have questions, please ask them. You can ask them on Twitter. You can, hit them up wherever else. Let's see. Make sure I get some links down below for information. Make sure you sign up for the Kickstarter.
yeah. Um, yeah, you were nice enough to put the link to the sign up for the Kickstarter in the description. I'd like to be transparent. Yes, Bill, I fully understand that. And it's like, um, anyway, I'm pretty active on Twitter. Powerbelt recently made an Instagram if you're an Instagram person and want to check us out there.
Right.
There's a contact form on the website. And sometimes our spam filter is a little bit too happy to throw people into spam, but I do
Yep.
check email
Yeah, I'll tell you.
almost every day.
Everyone, I think everyone got spammed that was using Gmail on the initial pick. of
Oh
who
my
you were picking
gosh.
because I barely saw it. Luckily, I checked it. Everyone's like, "Where is it?" But that's Bill. I assume Bill is asking when you'll start shipping the Tinybelt. I know you had originally talked in the thing about late September,
Yes.
something like that. Is that still on track, or is supply chain kind of slowing you down?
We ran into one hiccup beyond my initial estimation, and that came down to two components that had to be lightly customized from our supplier. But I'm still expecting that order to ship this Wednesday.
Nice.
And then that'll take 10 days ish to get here.
Yep.
So we should still be on track to start shipping late September.
Sweet.
And if you want a box of parts, obviously I can throw that together much more quickly than something that's
Right.
90% assembled, so I can get those out to you.
Right.
Fast.
And we could build them together. You could be building someone's, and we could, you and me, or whoever else, we could do a group build.
That sounds really fun.
Yeah, that'd be freaking cool. A couple hours here, a couple hours there.
Yeah.
Ninja's asking him if the main board allows external drivers. I know with the SKR Mini, is that going to be the E3? Or is that
For the beta units, it's going to be the SKR Mini V1.1, if I remember off the top of my head. So the drivers are built-in TMC 2209s.
Nice.
I think they'll be good.
Yeah, everyone uses 2209s. They're popular. The CAD models, Gector, will be open. We talked about after the Kickstarter success and once the printer's been released for sale, because just like Prusa, they don't release until that way it minimizes, the AliExpress clones that are going to happen.
It's honestly just the right thing to do for the backers, in my opinion. Like, if you are one of the people that's going to say, yes, I'm going to back this project and I want this to exist, it would be kind of crappy for me to publish the files and a company with a lot more resources can push out a clone that someone else can buy before the backers get what they wanted to support. So
Right.
that's my logic, is it's in support of the people who would become backers.
Yeah. There is a private chat link in our StreamYard if you want to monitor that as well.
For sure.
Let's see. Some suggestions. Ribbon cable, not bundles of flexing. No junk in the way of releasing heat break, yada yada. So just suggestions,
No junk in the way of releasing heat break. I love those ideas. I really do. The cable management side of things is an area that I personally often neglect on my printers.
I will agree with that on my end.
through our beta testers, I'm hoping that we can make something that's good. The thing about ribbon cables is it doesn't lend itself well to off-the-shelf components. And by working with off-the-shelf components, it makes people who want to upgrade or replace them, makes their lives much easier. It makes our lives easier in terms of cost, because anytime we have to customize something, the cost spikes up impressively.
Yeah. So. Long threaded nozzles and heat breaks. Yes, I understand that. I've broken my fair share of E3D V6s. I actually don't run them on my Prusas. I'm running Mosquitoes now because I like the one-handed, one and done, nozzle changes. And for the price, when I go through E3D V6s, and a lot of the guys know I will, I do. There'll probably be a Mosquito on that printer within 6 months, if not sooner. So let's see. Replaceable main boards. Yes. Yeah, that'll be good. People might want to put other boards in, depending. Is it a Creality style hot end? I know you mentioned MK8.
Confirmed. Yes.
How much of a difference is it in price to do the all metal? I would offer that as an upgrade in the Kickstarter, because I know I'll buy one for the beta, but you should definitely offer an all metal, maybe a slice, offer all these options. That way people can make it theirs.
Yeah. It's definitely something that I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
Because I do personally use and like all metal hot ends. I think it's the right way to go.
But for price.
But it's price. It's not confusing the suppliers, sadly. Sometimes in the past when I asked for all metal, I actually got Teflon lined because you can only see the Teflon from one side of the heat break, I'm guessing. So offering it as an upgrade or an add-on makes more sense than, I guess, customizing it out of the box.
Right.
Purely from a logistical standpoint.
And I know, probably standard PTFE on the machine, the big popular is the Capricorn, because it holds up to a non-all metal hot end better.
We will see what arrives, but I did request blue PTFE.
Nice.
With, the tighter diameter.
Right.
But again, we'll see what shows up.
Yes.
I might have to get a different shipment in.
Yeah, well, that's you're the designer. We'll let you have fun, and we'll just suggest as we go.
Yeah.
For those in chat, if there's any more questions, ask them now. Because we are going to be ending here in a couple minutes. We'll win over our hour allocation, but little long wins. That's okay.
Gotcha. Well, I appreciate you taking the time and being willing to do this.
No problem. It's your first official live stream with the world. Get out there, get the questions answered. And
since I've never done one of these, I didn't know how long my answers would be.
It's tough because you're also nervous. You want to fill the space. And we do. A bunch of the community does hangouts and all that, and things like that. And we got a few more questions. Let's see. Yeah, I agree with that.
Excellent insight.
Yeah, there's some stuff you can't sell. You can't do this. You can't do that. And I'm printing with a 1mm nozzle at 0.75 layer height right now.
Nice.
That's why, which is the first time I printed something that big, and it's not really coming out too well. It'll get canceled, but anyway. So for those of you, in chat, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your questions. Anything else you want to add at the end, Adam?
I just kind of as a closing thought, again, the link for people interested in the Kickstarter is in the description. If it's something you're interested in, would love to have you on board. It's been really fun so far working with the beta testers and the printing community as a whole so that we can make something affordable and open source, making it together. It's been really fun for me since when I was making the Zero. I was kind of like in my silo.
Right.
And it's been refreshing to engage with more of a team. So I'm happy with how everything's going so far, and would love for anyone to join the journey.
Awesome. So I guess that's it. I'm not very good at ending streams. I normally just hit the button.
The stream's over now.
The stream is going to end about any second now, and keep asking your questions on Twitter and. Sign up for the Kickstarter. Oh, and of course, good timing. Fun King 3D started a few minutes ago, so everyone go over to his channel, hang out with them, and we'll see you hopefully on the next live stream, maybe later in September when things start shipping.
All right.
So, all right. Goodbye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.